Hello and welcome to No Time. Today we are gonna briefly look at the backstory of the two main protagonists of the game. That being no one else than the protagonist we play as Paul Clearman and his friend and colleague Edward Athor. So, who is Paul and Edward, and how did they meet? Paul Clearman. It is not fully known where was he born, but the most likely case is in Saint Andre. This makes sense because we never see any Clearman's ancestors on Pine Island. He was born in the 1950s, most likely in or shortly before the year 1956. Despite being born in Saint Andre, Paul spent most of his childhood and early teens living on Pine Island. He went to St. Thomas School for elementary and middle education. When he grew up, he moved back to St. Andre and started attending St. Therese University, where in 1978 he got his degree in temporal and experimental physics. This is also where he met Edward. Now, what did Edward do till this point? Edward Ruel Athor. Edward was born on December 26, 1956, on Pine Island. At just the age of 14, he went on a dangerous adventure to explore the full sewer system under Pine Lake. There, he encountered many aggressive cats and just barely survived. There is a spin-off game covering this called Edward's Sewer Adventure. It serves as a prequel game to No Time, following young Edward in this journey. He met Paul in college and also got a degree in temporal and experimental physics. After school, these two started working for the Manhofer testing grounds, a big lab complex under the Manhofer Institute located on Root Island, which is an island directly connected to Pine Island, making the distance to it walkable. Their work started fairly normally, working on regular inventions and tech. However, around the year 1980, Edward proposed to Paul plans for something big, a time displacement unit, a device that would be able to jump to any point in time, a time machine. How will this great idea evolve? Well, not so smoothly. Here, let me elaborate. So, they start working on it, of course keeping their work in secret in case anyone would have a problem with them building the time machine. They originally planned to use a fridge as a base for the machine, only then realizing they won't be able to open the fridge from the inside. And so they designed their own shell for it. That is a much better idea. After implementing some of the technology into it, they thought they were ready for the first test, but after some thinking, Edward realized the amount of energy needed was not calculated properly, and if they went for the test, the whole island would probably blow up, and so they abandoned this prototype. Instead of a stationary shell, they concluded that a moving one would be much better, a car for example. First of all, it would solve a lot of the problems of successfully jumping through time, and second of all, if you're gonna build a time machine, why not do it with some style? And so they did. They continued working and improving. They had a big supply of uranium since working in Manhofer, which at the time was experimenting with nuclear-fueled cars. And turns out, fission energy is very useful as an energy source for time travel. After some time, their prototype, Match 2, was done, and it was time to test it. Paul would be the one carrying this task. They filled the car with uranium, got everything set up, and used the tunnel in the Manhofer lab to test it. The car accelerated, gaining more and more speed. Paul was quickly losing space, and the car still didn't quite look like it's in the mood to make any time jump. And it didn't. Paul crashed into a wall. Luckily, he survived without any major injuries. But Match 2? Yeah, it didn't end up well. This is not ideal. But trust me, it gets way worse. Paul and Ed certainly didn't quit the project. They took their previous mistakes into consideration and started work on Match 3. It took a lot of time and effort, but they did manage to finish it. And this time it looked even more promising than Match 2. What else now? Then of course test it out. The date was April 15, 1984. And who is gonna be the testing guy this time? Paul. It's Paul again. The test was set up the same way as last time, and this time it actually worked. Paul actually disappeared with the car. Edward was amazed to see this. Now it's just time to wait until he reappears again. The car was set to travel just 1 hour into the future to test this. But not everything will go very smooth for Edward in this hour. Shortly after the test, dozens of masked men broke into the facility, attacking Edward and attempting to steal research. Edward luckily had a plasmatic gun he built, and so he managed to defend himself. When match 3 arrived, Paul was immediately attacked by these agents, but Edward was nearby and managed to defend him. They drove the car into a safe secret part of the facility, and there Edward explained everything that happened. But they can't stay there safe for too long. The agents know about the time machine and they are here to get it. That's why Ed tells Paul he needs to get out of there, not just in space, but also in time. He sends Paul to go a few years into the future, telling him they will meet there, and Edward will stay there to defend the lab. Paul hesitates, but agrees to do this plan. And so he escapes the building with the car, and then travels into the future, not to be seen for a whole 30 years. Edward survives the rest of the attack. However, the agents manage to steal plans for the time machine, and damage the facility to the point it had to be closed down forever. I've talked about this incident more in detail in my video about time agents, so go check that out if you want to. After all this, Edward partially moved on, started work in a different, smaller Manhofer facility located directly in Pine Lake. He worked on many different inventions throughout the years, including a device called Dimension Box, for example. A box that can hold items bigger than its own physical space. However, in 1989, specifically because of this invention, the agents appeared in this facility again, raiding it and stealing the research for the box, almost killing Edward again during this. Luckily, he survived again. After this, the facility have gradually declined and in the 2000s was converted into a museum of science. After this near-death incident, Edward tried to kinda disappear from the spotlight of whoever these agents might be. He stopped working on any big inventions that they might want to steal again. His last big project was a weather machine he worked on in 2004. But after testing it, the project failed. Luckily, no agents showed up this time. A year later, in 2005, he opened his tech shop in center of Pine Lake. It is a slight step down from working for a big tech company like Manhofer, but as I said, his focus now was to keep a low profile. He still remembers Paul and expects him to show up soon, but he is slowly losing hope, starting to think if he even made it out to facility in '84. But even when keeping it low, he did manage to invent something useful, a device called Mr. Crafty. It lets you craft tech gadgets much easier and quicker than normally, and Edward patented it. It started to sell all around the world, and it became a very known, very useful invention. At this point, he haven't heard about the agents for some time, which is good news. And then, the ultimate year 2014 comes. The year that Paul has escaped to, and will reconnect with Edward. But that's a story for another video, specifically my full story on Act 1 of No Time video, which should be releasing soon. And that's about it for today. The information I talked about in this video is pretty known for most players, but not so much for new ones, so it's still useful. And, well, I can't release my Act 1 video, so I just needed some content. So hopefully, see you in no time.